Broken Thing, Chapter 7. Kegerin was focused and inspired, while appearing to be cowed and faltering. He composed as requested the list of Itron's associates at theoretical risk of retaliation for Vicarian and relayed them as asked. He listened when the counselor contacted him and did not speak a great deal, even when prompted, voice respectful, tentative, and intimidated. Vicarian noticed and responded, became more and more solicitous of the frightened Drell, until they reached a level where Vicarian was reassuring in his manner, and Kegerin was successfully reassured. True to Cara's assessments, Vicarian preferred a peer-to-peer relationship with those he worked with, at least in appearance and on the surface. Vicarian was civil and respectful by nature and inclination. He even attempted humor, though Kegerin did not respond to it as such. Vicarian did not wish to exert his authority overtly, but he did wish to establish and maintain it. Comrades and confidence was his tone, although Cara had warned him Vicarian would use that, parallel to other lines of thought. He had the easy manner of a friendly officer interviewing rather than interrogating a witness, and not a criminal, just to straighten this all out. He was possibly suspicious and angling for information that might not be granted any other way unless confidence and lull was established. Kegerin would accommodate the counselor's style with the studied and customized creation of Kegerin's personality. People in authority would obtain obedience and assistance from him. Kegerin would be quiet and retiring, somewhat lost in the unaccustomed dark and deep significance of his potential actions. Once convinced, he would be determined to try to help, despite his shortcomings of experience and intellect compared to the larger-than-life personalities of those that inhabited the Council and the Normandy. Kegerin crafted an equilibrium of stability of tone, where Vicarian likely felt he had manipulated Kegerin into being calmer and more forthcoming, bolstering the Drell's courage and assuring him of the mission being an ultimate success. Vicarian asked questions, repeated and verified much of what he had already been told, an odd habit of non-Drell species that invoked in all Drell a sense of pity, and made them cautious of, and disappointed in, fragile memory. Vicarian hopefully would have a memory that retained a great deal and made connections, and came to conclusions only possible with a certain level of intellect and capacity, if he were to be an asset in the war, and if he were to discover some of Thane Krios's more cruel flourishes. The repetition of facts that was Vicarian's habit and strategic approach was something only done by species such as Taurians or humans, who had members statistically incapable of keeping a story straight, and might slip up due to forgetting a detail. Obviously, it was not true that Drell were not liars. What was true is that if a Drell were lying, it was statistically impossible that they would slip up and forget a detail. Comparing renditions of truth a Drell produced for discrepancy was a waste of time. It was unlikely Vicarian had dealt with many Drell in his lifetime. Inferior memory was a taboo to discuss with other species, something that inspired in Drell universal pity. Unless Vicarian had had an extraordinarily close Drell associate or excellent diplomatic advisor who had informed him, despite Drell tendency toward pity of the memory failing and insularity, he was not being purposely insulting. He was only ignorant. Any lower status and culturally conservative and polite Drell would understand this was not intended as insult, would not expect an apology, draw attention to the behavior, or attempt to correct the habit. Any other Drell, of reasonable dignity given free rein in a theoretically peer-to-peer business relationship, might ask the counselor if he needed to be reminded of the identity of the woman they sought to rescue, or if time was so much in abundance that it could be wasted so flagrantly. Business dealings with Drell and non-Drell always took place in contracts, straightforward in Drell, but with other species, something they astonishingly did not read, recall, or comprehend as a matter of course. He was somewhat disappointed at the ease of establishing rapport, hoping Vicarian was wiser than he appeared, but at this point his script must be followed and anticipation of further planning playing out must be deferred. Yet another thing he adored about Cara that was lacking in other people. She was always capable of appreciating his preparation and authenticity of craft. Her ability to see would be missed, and he mourned having to opt for her ignorance rather than risk her capacity to be lethal in her comprehension. Contact with other people and the dull impression of boredom they induced paradoxically sharpened his interest in speaking to her whole again, and likely always would. He wondered how he would manage that interest if someday the Reapers were gone. He could keep her far from surveillance, pull her out of Venom Haze with her small body under his, restrained. He could tell her, and then take it away. He could have some part of a day in her company. He could watch the realization over and over. She had at the moment, and potentially forever, some aspect of buried treasure he would wish to uncover and sift with his hands. Something to consider. He would not recreate Beckenstein, past wishing to display her to others. He would prefer to avoid Vicarian in favor of Cara's company. He would prefer to avoid everyone in favor of Cara's company. He wished for her to be displayed to him, always. They moved on to discussing the specifics of Beckenstein, the planet, and the exact location of the estate, to which Kegurin replied, "Sir, if I may, I am aware of the security requirements, capabilities, and the expectations of the host. I believe if I am able to remove her chip and track her without alerting security, there is a possible way that I may arrange for her escape. I'm hoping to take care of that from here. I'd rather a professional agent managed the extraction." "Sir, I understand and I sympathize with that ambition. I am aware I am not a professional and that I do not inspire confidence. But substitution of another in my place will not work. They will not gain entry. The Council can do an awful lot about a captive citizen. With respect, sir, on Beckenstein, the Council as an entity is not recognized to have any legal authority, and incursion would be answered with deadly force. Each estate is imbued with the rights equivalent to those of a sovereign nation, granted not in perpetuity but as long as fees are paid. Thane, through his payment of those fees, is guaranteed no interference in his business by other recognized legal entities or invaders while on his estate, and a strong defense of his estate if he invokes the need. The escape must take place quickly and risk only triggering local estate security, and then only at the last few moments. To alert the planetary defense system would be lethal to any vehicle attempting extraction. So if the Council can't do anything, who can? The planet of Beckenstein has created a system of law that provides individual, impenetrable sanctuaries, defense, and arbitration for owners of estates. These owners are not citizens of Beckenstein. They create their own law on their estates, unquestioned. According to the corporation that manages Beckenstein's bureaucracy, Commander Shepard is anything from visitor to property of Thane, as am I when I am there. He can choose what he does with us while we are on his estate. We have no legal rights as individuals. If we are outside the domain or contract of a single estate owner, we belong to Beckenstein, and they can choose to treat us as visitor or property. Before entering the atmosphere of Beckenstein, each vehicle and each vehicle's passenger is provided with a contract to authorize that informs visitors of these conditions. They authorize this agreement, or they leave. If they do not authorize and persist in incursion, they are shot down or taken and claimed as property. Beckenstein would then open up negotiations to return any property to estate owners that claim interest. I accepted a contract under duress, as my only other option was to die. Commander Shepard either accepted a similar contract under duress, or one was created without her knowledge, and is on file, authorized by her biometrics, stating that she arrived on Beckenstein and Thane Krios' estate of her own free will, and will abide by his law. As part of my recruitment, I was informed, politely, of many of the security capabilities and the planet's policies in order to intimidate me. I was successfully intimidated. I was informed of her disposition as property, of my disposition as situational property who would be released upon delivering satisfactory services as required by my contract. If I did well, I would live and be asked to return likely in another 6 months for a maintenance check or in cases of her having a health emergency. If I did not perform according to my contract, I would be killed. If I attempted to sabotage the process of my contract by not making myself available, disclosing the terms of my contract, or attempting to rescue or assist my charge other than medically, the consequence would be torture before death, and torture and death of my friends and associates, their names given to me as I have given them to you. I did not expect that I would be permitted to leave, but I believe I was allowed to leave as a result of the situation Krios faces dealing with her as property and his wish for her identity to remain concealed. Healthcare is available from providers on Beckenstein, but I doubt he wished to expose her to that process. There she would be off his estate, and he would have contracted to Beckenstein that she would be their property while they cared for her. This is a formality under normal circumstances, such as caring for any of the number of security and service staff that the estates employ. In her case, her identity is concealed, but she is worth a great deal of money to many people, and the information that Commander Shepard is held by Thane Krios on Beckenstein is also worth a great deal of money. He would open himself to extortion or ransom by Beckenstein's rapacious, bureaucratic civil servants, and potential rescue if her disposition were sold. The conditions of my arrival and departure were arranged with the understanding that if I were to find her ill, I would not attempt to remove her from the site or call in additional medical assistance. The consequences of attempting to do so would be death for both of us if I triggered automated security responses by crossing certain boundaries. I was escorted to her door and escorted away, given no opportunity to deviate. I am alive because I can be of potential use to him in the future. He would have medical assistance readily available without risk of exposure. If I can provide a blood test that indicates she requires a vitamin D supplement for lack of sunlight, and a scan whose analysis suggests mild nephrolithiasis, I can return to the estate and deliver the suggested outpatient, appropriate maintenance care, reducing the cover required to lull internal security until the last moment. And how would you get her out without either of you being executed? I had considered that before coming to you. I hope to offer a solution and not merely a problem that would likely result in her death. Under the guise of the injection and lithotripsy, I should be able to extract the control chip. At that point, she would no longer be compelled, though she would likely be disoriented and in pain. I cannot sedate her, She must be lucid to cooperate in her own escape. She must cooperate through the removal of the tracker. It is possible an escape route could be created from the room in which I examined her previously. How so? I will have access to compact ultrasound equipment such as might be used to locate and break up a small forming stone in a kidney. I believe the glass in her room is reinforced but not alarmed except for her tracker, which I can remove. If the ultrasound component were set to overloaded output, augmented through the use of other components in the equipment I was given prior, the glass may shatter, and escape could be facilitated through that route. Unfortunately, she and I also run the risk of potential rupture of eardrums or other sensitive tissue if the directionality of the overloaded ultrasound is not precise. That will be difficult to predict, but hopefully, if it results in injury, it can be treated immediately after and should be non-lethal. She will need to be treated immediately. She will have a recently opened wound directly to her spine, with attendant risk of infection and residual injury. Her tracker is embedded in her iliac crest, her hip. Extraction may be difficult, and it will be painful. Her room is on the 3rd story of the building overlooking the 2nd story and the cliff. She cannot go down to the terrace without activating the sentient and automatic security that surrounds the estate. We can briefly escape to the roof of the 2nd story. It is a precarious position and dangerous, with no escape route on foot. If airborne extraction is not provided, we will die there. There is an outer perimeter of weaponry. It is intended to shoot out and not in. If the glass breaks and her tracker and chip are removed successfully, it is possible we could be extracted without harm with the use of a locally authorized vehicle. Not CSEC, not council-affiliated. It must have legal access to estate rights and privileges. That vehicle must take refuge in another estate, must not attempt to exit the planetary system with the property of another. Once recovered property is on their own estate, then they may dispose of it as they choose. All right. I'll see what I can do about that. Much of the security potential of estates on Beckenstein is not a secret, but a boast. They advertise and provide blueprints and security options to potential buyers. They are not an illegal operation. They are highly structured, defended, and capitalist. I looked into the law and the estate planning when I was pressured into the contract. You can find all you need to know about external security systems and options for an estate of his composition, as well as customizable alarms and response systems. These can be programmed to detect tracker implants. The location for extraction is advantageous only briefly and only due to its cover from automated turrets. Airships, if given time to launch, would result in death. I do not believe anybody other than I would be able to accomplish this. I have limited license through contract to touch, examine, and provide care for her, and we will be monitored, but not accompanied. Outer transportation is something I cannot arrange. That is something you must provide. If diversionary vehicles are employed to draw fire, that would be helpful. Those vehicles can be unmanned and activated remotely. If you cannot guarantee that the owner of that vehicle and destination estate is willing to relinquish us, all you will accomplish would be to have us taken into their personal custody, and a finder's fee clause in the contract can be invoked. Once filed, that clause will make us property in escrow. As escrow property, we would be remanded to the custody of the bureaucratic civil servants Thane so wishes to avoid in her case. We will be killed if we attempt to evade the law or our ultimate owner. We would most likely be sold back to Thane, but it is possible that she may be identified in the process. We might both undergo a sorry interrogation while in escrow, as circumstances would invoke curiosity. They would wish to know if there was any way they could raise the price of ransom higher. In her case, certainly, yes. In mine, no. I am convinced he would be anxious to buy her back. In my case, he might abandon me or purchase me in order to fulfill the promise regarding my breaking the contract he provided. Future attempts to rescue her would be exponentially more difficult in planning or execution. I believe she would be immediately relocated to elsewhere on Beckenstein for eventual transfer to another anonymous secure harbor for criminal license. We must have false papers and passage to escape the planet itself after we have escaped the estate. That's a lot of maybe. Indeed, it is, sir. But I have access. I have opportunity, and with assistance, I believe it is a viable option. I would need your assistance with the authenticated lab results from a lab here on the Citadel, the transportation, and identity transfer. All right. Let me talk to my team, see what I can do. Thank you, Dr. Etran. You are welcome, Counselor Vicarian. May Amon Kira bless this path. May Arashu watch over her. How many times have you failed to rescue a slave you intended to rescue? Of those I had plans to rescue, 7 failed. Of those I had the desire to rescue, thousands failed. And the number of successful extractions? 34. Let's work on 35, and not 8. Agreed, Counselor. Russ was called in on a conference with Garrus and Liara, all of them exhausted and tense. Russ was unable to see how this insane and suspicious plan that Garrus had quickly written up and transferred to him to ask for advice could possibly result in anything good. The Normandy had just finished helping Dr. Solus locate and execute one of his protégés, Melon. He'd been running sick, insane experiments in an old hospital on Tuchanka, the smell indicative of how much medicine was going on versus torture, bloody bodies and mangled minds. Morden had shot Melon, and the twisted information about reversing the genophage had been destroyed. Like the galaxy needed more Krogan. Talking to Rex had only been possible through Caden because the Urdnot clan leader had been livid about Russ allowing Shepard to be taken or killed while Russ was on deck. You know what, Turian? When I was on that ship, she never disappeared. Seems I get off the Normandy and everything goes down Calroth's gullet. Where the hell was Vicarian? Where the hell were you? Turians looking out only for their own is why Tuchanka is the way she is, why I'd happily snap your mandibles off and shove them down your throat for letting whatever happened to Shepard happen. Caden had said, Rex, we need to work together. You know she wouldn't want this. Yeah, I know. That's why you're not dead. That's why I didn't shoot you down. But I don't have to take shit from a bare-faced Taurian about what I owe him. I don't know him. I don't like him. He's only alive because you probably wouldn't like me blowing his shell out of the air. Russ had glared, and Rex had glared, and Caden had talked his way into courtesy permission to go find Melon while Urdnot sniped. Try not to lose Caden, too, on the way. Maybe tag him, so you can track him. He always kind of looked like a piejack. Caden had smiled. Good seeing you too, Rex. Thanks. Why the hell did you guys give up looking for her? We haven't. You better not, human. Find her. Don't come back until you do. They hadn't tried to see the clan leader again on their way out. He didn't lose Caden, at least. Most of their missions had been busy work, but he had gotten back to the mission of the Collectors, and not just trying to track Shepard with no leads. He hadn't liked her much, but he hadn't wanted her gone. Okay. He'd wanted her gone. He'd wanted her gone and for Garrus to be okay, but that was not an option. Garrus was a wreck. Worse now. They'd gotten to a point where his pure rage and helplessness had dulled, at least in its expression, but now he was manic. Russ had visited Garrus every time he could, sat with him, got drunk with him, heard more Shepard stories, and had been alternately guilty and pissed off and horrified and angry, grieving for the real loss and waste taking place in front of him in the form of Garrus Vicarian's diminishing body and mind. He was never, ever going to tell Garrus that he thought maybe the war effort would be better served without her. He couldn't tell Liara. Hell, they could all barely talk to each other honestly. They could only say supportive things. Him saying, "We'll get her back. We won't give up." He didn't say things like, "It took 2 years last time. It's only been a few months." Garrus's perspective and sense of humor were gone, and Russ was not going to test them. Hero worship was his only option, listening to Garrus like he had for years. He was supportively there while Garrus lost his sanity and will to live in bulk, managing to hold on only to the bag they came in. It all sounded like a ridiculous trap to let the planet of Beckenstein declare war on the Citadel, and the Turian Councilor in particular. Garrus had to be restrained from flying straight in. He had to be convinced to slow down and listen. But listen to what? Listen to anything other than, "This is Commander Shepard's blood"? Not likely. No proof of life, nothing but the word of a very shaky drill. All Russ could see happening was that if this was her, she was gonna die. If she died as a result of Garrus's actions, it was the end for him. If he didn't recover her, Garrus would make it his life's mission to raze Beckenstein to the ground. Unfortunately, that was impossible. Beckenstein wasn't interested in being involved in trade agreements or civil rights concerns of the Citadel. Garrus had zero leverage and a lot of animosity. Don't trade with Beckenstein? Sure. No problem. Black market handles everything. Garrus could not accept that he could not go in, rifle blazing, and take down the planet single-handed. He'd done it with Shepard, now he wanted to do it for Shepard. Ideally, he thought if a squad of Liara, Russ, and Garrus went in... That was, frankly, ignorant and crazy, and not Shepard crazy, shooting for a low chance of success, but just an expression of an insane Turian who had mainlined helplessness for 6 months and now had a lead, yanking at a leash that wasn't there because he was a counselor. Garrus was used to having legal authority and could not accept that authority was a liability when dealing with Beckenstein. Garrus wanted to bring down the most entrenched redoubt of criminal activity in existence and could not grasp, because he did not want to grasp, that Beckenstein had endless funding. And Krios was highly motivated to keep his hive of illegality working for him. Garrus was treating it like a normal extraction raid, and that would not work. He could not be brought to see how. Liara had asked Russ to help her convince Garrus that they absolutely could not do it his way. Russ was worried about Garrus taking off in a shuttle, signing a contract, and ending up property of Thane Krios or Beckenstein's corporation, who would be perfectly happy to incarcerate, interrogate, extort, and then ransom him back with 1% of his mind left in order to qualify for returning him alive. Hell, there might not be enough money to even get him back dead. Even attempting to do anything the way the Drell suggested was going to take every credit Garrus had, potentially, if they could not stop him. He was willing to raise funds and tried to buy an estate himself. That was upward of 2 billion credits. Garrus didn't have that, but he was determined to use Vicarian funds, council funds, personal funds, everything the shadow broker could produce. Russ listened while Garrus paced, and Liara said, "Garrus, we can't do that. Escrow would take months. I have a contact." Garrus's head snapped up. "Someone we can trust to hand over Commander Shepard?" "They won't know she's Commander Shepard." "And if they find out?" "Garrus, we can't buy an estate. We just can't. Time constraints. We'd be leaving her there for months, and there's no guarantee she'd be there still in 6 months if they called Dr. Itran back." "No, not 6 months. I know that. Now. Get it done now. I've got to be able to—" "Garrus, you can't." "Not you, too. Absolutely me. Garrus, what if it's a trap? What if someone just had some of her blood on ice and decided they could get a lot of money or influence out of you?" "It can't be that, Russ. It's her. It's got to be her." "I know, Garrus. We're gonna do everything we can. Together. Minimal crazy." "Minimal crazy? Doesn't really sound like us, does it?" "It's got to be her. We're gonna find out. We're gonna do it. But you cannot go off on your own, Garrus. None of us can go there. We are all recognizable and associated immediately with Commander Shepard. If you get involved, we have to rescue or ransom you and deal with the fact that Krios is tipped off to the idea that you know she's there. You can't." There was a crash, a now familiar crash and shatter, and something hopefully replaceable in Garrus's office was broken. Probably something replaced multiple times in the past 6 months. Garrus stood still, moved his hand from his crest to the back of his neck, and said, "Yeah, that doesn't really sound like me, does it?" "Garrus, please. It's risky, I know. You can't go there. We can't go. I can get the estate set up. Look, a lot of business happens on Beckenstein, and I do have an agent who is an estate holder. They are risking one vehicle and will be well compensated for any damage. The reason why this is viable is that they were retiring. Only 2 weeks left on their fee contract. They have already extracted personally and won't be at risk. Will only collect a huge fee. They can manage remote contracting through me. I've done it before. I can cover that, I promise. I trust them. One good thing about Beckenstein is that extraction, once they get there, will be easy. He's not wrong about that. Let me handle the Beckenstein end." "What if we tell them and then... Hell, I don't know. Use Beckenstein rules. Do what Krios does? Threaten their family?" "No, Garrus. That's not the way information works. Once you let it out..." "Thank you, Liara. I'm sorry. Spirits, I am not accustomed to feeling so useless." "It's okay, Vicarian. You got the job 'cause you're pretty." "Yeah, so I'll just sit here and look pretty and clean up some glass." "Okay. How long do you think it will take to set up, Liara?" 4 days. Get the blood test and the scan done." "So I'm just moral support?" and comedy relief. Glad I'm good for something.